Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catalyst After Town Hall session with the DripDropz team. Today, we are talking communication catastrophes. So let's get right into it. So actually, right before the call, we were just talking with Ivan here, and he was telling us a little bit about his proposal that he has. And Ivan, you can just really quickly again, it's the Oniron, right, proposal that you're doing.
No, it's called Oniron. It's
Oniron.
ancient Greek for dream,
Mhm.
and it's the proposal is about creating an SDK for spinning up Cardano sidechains very quickly for folks who are not familiar with Haskell, but are in fact enterprise developers familiar with JVM technologies or JavaScript.
Right on.
So yeah, that's the quick pitch for that proposal.
Right.
And Sean here was not even aware that that proposal was in Fund 9. Um,
True.
so that's a communication catastrophe, like a pretty much textbook.
What a way to open up.
Of no fault of your own. It's a fault of the community and just the context that we find ourselves in. It's very difficult to communicate. It's very difficult to attach the proposal to the person. I think there's been some experimentation with the kind of speed dating. I think we need a little bit more about that, but I think as a quick intro to these calls, maybe we could all just briefly introduce, and if you propose proposal, put it in the chat. But my name's Sean. I do openlittermap.com and Littercoin, and we've got 3 proposals for Fund 9.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And yeah, with Gavin Lloyd, obviously with the DripDropz team, and in our case, we have 2 proposals from the DripDropz team that we've put forward in Fund 9 as well. We're all wishing everybody the best of success. I know now, I think out in the main space that Chris was saying that we're all kind of seat of our pants, just stay at the edge of our chairs, waiting to hear what the results will be. And so we'll, looking forward to finding that out next week. And when we gather next week in the space, we'll actually should know more. We should have results by Tuesday. So by next Wednesday's town hall, some of us may have some better information to share on that. And so that's been wonderful. And, part of what we're talking about today with communications, we're talking really specifically on crisis communication. There's been some things where we as the DripDropz team have run into over the last, not quite year, since January this year, that we've had some things where our team has been faced with making some very difficult decisions on how to communicate things and whether or not to communicate certain things, and what's the best way for information to get to our public and the community at large, because sometimes it's information that we can't share, so we have to make decisions based on that. We can't share that information, so how do we address it? How do we avoid a problem? I want to say up front, part of this is good interpersonal communication, good inter-team communication, where we, lay it out and say, hey, here's where I'm at with this matter right now. And our team's gotten good at that. We have moments where we go back and forth a good bit, but we've gotten pretty good at laying out and saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling about this issue. And when we're not on the same page, we try to find consensus somewhere. And I think that's a super, just as anytime you're doing communication, then you've got a team of people, make sure that your internal team's talking well, because if they're not, that can lead to problems with your external communications right there, because one person may say something that other people don't agree with, and it can cause other problems. So our team's been pretty good on that front. Where we've fallen short a couple of times, we had a potential client who came to us rather publicly, and then after that happened, we found out we couldn't deal with that particular client. It was not through any fault of our own, but we found out we couldn't deal with that particular client because of some things that were, the way they were set up. And so we had to say, hey, we can't do this. And we think we maybe even went a little too far, right, Rick? We communicated the best we could at the time, but we maybe added a line or two too much.
Right. Sometimes less is more or better, because we were just trying to, we were fatigued, for one thing. We did not realize that we had been suffering from fatigue, and we were working between the technical team the marketing team and the risk management team,
Yeah.
and we just kind of we could have done better. We certainly could have done better. Yeah, and we learned from that. And that's important as well. Is that once you go through this response, response mechanisms, that you learn from it and say, okay, how could we have done this better? A lot of times you get feedback from the public, and it's very good.
Mhm.
I would say the way this relates to Catalyst is communicating the project or product that you're delivering so that people can see it. It's very similar to any new projects, products, or deliveries we do on DripDropz as well. It's hard. Marketing takes a lot of work. It's hard to purchase out of the box marketing in crypto, so the communications become critical. Unless you can get a good marketer on your team who's focused and targeting at the actual marketing. A lot of startup teams don't have marketers. They say, let's build something first, and then we'll work on the communicating to the public. And sometimes we kick the can down the road and say maybe the communication is not just DripDropz, but teams might say maybe we don't need to communicate that yet. And then sometimes we catch ourselves and go, ooh, we need to be communicating we have a marketing plan on our products. And then we say, okay, now this is the Project Catalyst. So we need to refocus our efforts on marketing the catalyst for creating new products so that people know what we're trying to create.
Exactly.
It's really cool. Communications are complicated, and they're extremely important.
Right, but I also want to interject that we're doing this amidst other people whose only game is to just market. That's the only game. They're not building product. They lead with marketing. And so we're competing against that too. And it's real. That I would say 80 to 90% of the competition that we see is marketing fluff. And not just direct competition with DripDropz, but new introductory projects even to Cardano. It's a high amount of high marketing versus quality.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And this is, I would say this has been true of crypto probably for as long as crypto's been a thing. Maybe the very earliest days were a little different, but, going through, say the ICO phase when I really kind of got into this back in about 2017 or so, from there to now, that's been what I've seen. It's like occasionally you've got a real difference maker doing some real work, but then they're just completely drowned out by all of these different projects that are marketing hype. They're just throwing garbage in the wall to see what sticks. And unfortunately, a lot sticks.
Yeah. I try to weed out the real stuff from the noise in the process. So Lloyd, I was wondering if you're going to talk about, as the title of the video implies, the communication catastrophes.
Oh, yes.
And a really good example to frame is, for example, with Adam and Andrew, who happen to be Node DevOps. They also happen to be code builders. They happen to be doing all these other things. They also happen to be on DripDropz as well. Yep. Right. They're also team members of ours. And when the catastrophe word was dropped, they were actually they were correct. Maybe people don't like that word, but they got to get used to it because it was potentially that's what it. That test net is dead.
Well, part of that communication failure, I think, happened because Adam Dean was not an SPO. He opted to shut down his Buffy pool because of market circumstances, but absolutely relied on the test net and all the functionality for his business. So he's an entrepreneur who came to Cardano. So by approaching it from an SPO perspective versus an entrepreneur perspective, that was a huge communication disconnect between IOG and the Cardano community.
Yeah, because he was very well communicated on the DevOps side, and he understood very clearly what had happened. And when the communications went out, and here's the important observation I made was, they were just saying, hey, look, we observed this. We think it needs a closer look, right? Now, what happens is when that goes out into the media, you could, you're advertising what you're saying one thing, hey, I need this important thing to get noticed. The media gets hold of it and they kind of bend it around a little bit. They want to embellish. Why? Because they make money off of clicks. And so, yay, now I'm getting clicks, but they don't get clicks off the great stuff. Like, for example, how much positive news have you seen about the Vassal event tomorrow coming out of CoinDesk and Cointelegraph?
Well,
To be honest, I'm not seeing a lot.
Nobody understands what Vassal is, right? No one, your average room temperature IQ journalist doesn't understand the ramifications that the Vassal hard fork is going to have.
Right.
You're absolutely right about engagement on these things. People only read the headlines. People only see all the front, it's the front cover, it looks great. Oh, this is what the embed link says on Twitter. That must be true. Very few people do the deep dive, and then when they do get to the platform, they have to click through like 15 different types of advertisement, right? Because that's how they generate their revenue. If they're not outright shills, it's a tragic state of crypto journalism that we're in right now. And Cardano's had the short end of the stick for the longest time.
Yeah, it's pretty much all journalism like that now. I don't consider it journalism anymore. It's just all of it, no matter what subject, including crypto. Crypto's just worse. But I think the key point I was trying to make there was that it was important to sound the alarm or communicate something important. And then it got misconstrued, misunderstood, and there was also communication problems on the end that was trying to fight against Adam and Andrew because their communications weren't clear either as to what was the impact and what is the long-term effect.
Right, exactly.
And so that's what had to get across. Now, and like you can see, it's hard to get good news like the Vassal event promoted in the news. But when something bad happens, wow, that's just all over the place. It gets blown out of proportion. Even though it was accurate, it got twisted even worse. And that's not the fault of the communicators. That's not the fault of Adam and Andrew. They need to have the freedom to communicate in the future. If they see something good, bad, or indifferent, they need to have a public platform where they can transmit that information and not worry about the media, because the problem is not our community engineers like you guys sitting in this room, guys and gals alike. The problem is not them communicating. The problem is the media will twist it. Okay. And the other problem is they don't want to promote your good stuff. You got great proposals out there. You're bringing good things to Cardano. How do you get that information out there? And it gets kind of overpowered by the weird and nefarious things and the latest hack on Ethereum, which is pretty much daily recently. And that overpowers all the good things that y'all are doing. And so,
right, it's an interesting space with a lot of challenges, and that's why I thought this was such a great. We have enough distance from the catastrophic event to really kind of sit back a little and just reflect on it. Like, what were the elements that worked? Like, let me say this: Adam's communication worked. If we're judging it based upon whether or not the warning got out that he wanted to put out, yes, that absolutely happened.
Yeah, 80% of the node operators didn't upgrade. Million follower account told everybody to upgrade.
That's right, and that's what it literally.
Decentralization, guys, we did it.
Right.
Yeah, Kyle made a good call because Kyle said, shout out to the 80% node operators that held the line. And I was like, yeah, that's my boy.
Right.
Because 80% held the line.
So so there's the point, right? So
they held the line compared to not cross a line that was perfectly safe to cross.
Such a huge statement.
They paused and they used more caution. They said, well, let's look at this first. Let's get it resolved and make sure we understand what's happening. Because the actual bug was found on mainnet. It was not found on testnet.
Right.
It was found on mainnet, and it was identified by Martin and the cool guy, whoever the cool guy is. And there were community people who identified it because an upgrade that was not cleared from mainnet yet was actually put on mainnet. So it was fortunate. We were lucky. What's it called? It was a happy accident, right? It was a happy accident. Found that.
Well, that's the point. Like we're decentralized.
Also, people didn't know that the 135.0 it was cleared from mainnet, and 135.0 had the same bug. 135.1. We have messages in our Telegram from the SPO channels. That one was cleared from mainnet. It also contained the bug. So the cleared from mainnet is
Bullshit.
now we got to pause and say, okay, let's make sure it's cleared from mainnet.
And I think, and ultimately, again, dialing it back to what was Adam's intention, right? What was Adam trying to accomplish? He was trying to accomplish a significant warning, a very, in his mind, important warning that the community needed to hear. He communicated that. It was effective because 80% of the block producers said no.
I mean,
we'll wait.
Look, we know this.
Yeah.
Rick, you know this, and I know this, and Martin knows this, that there are a handful of stake pool operators who have single-handedly caught shit that IOG QA didn't. Simple as that. The chain has been saved by regular SPOs who showed up. That's a fact. And it's as simple as that. Let us have our testing process. It's absolutely necessary. And that was the point that Andrew and Adam were trying to make, is that we are not, we have taught the best of IOG things they didn't know. That's all I'm going to say about it. The stake pool operators that showed up early. Yeah. The stake pool operators.
IOG does the hard work in engineering, and now they do recognize the importance of the community engineers looking at it and testing it in various environments, because that's how they identified the faults. For example, most people did not know that there were previous bugs. The one that was caught by David, that would have messed up mainnet pretty bad. There was one caught by Michael. It was a DDoS attack that would have been really bad. And so, and then the follow-on ones that were identified by Martin and Cool.
The point being is SPO public testing is valuable. It's extremely critical to this mission. And to neglect it was a misstep. And I stand behind Adam and I stand behind Andrew 100% of the way. If they're not comfortable, I'm not comfortable. I trust them enough to their technical expertise. They've shown individuals who told me everything was going to be okay, that everything's not okay. You see what I'm saying? So I know who to follow in this space.
Right. So so this brings another point into what communication really is. Communication also has to do with a form of authority, right? A form of knowledge that the people that you are speaking to you in a way that you can accept what they're saying, whether or not what they're saying is valid and valuable. So again, another important step of what happened here in that situation was that what Adam did was he set a precedent of hey, this information is important, even if people with large Twitter followings don't think it is. It's still important, and the community said that authority is important to me, and they followed suit. And that's where I'm trying to get at now. Is I'm trying to I'm breaking down the communication into the different aspects of it, right? That's where we want to go. We want to understand that there is more than one element to communication. There is the sort of the outward facing stuff, the words you choose, but there is authority. There's expertise. There's like ethos and pathos, right? These things that are important in the way that the communication's accepted and how it's acted upon. And so trying to find ways, and I'm glad this is all coming up, because this is exactly the point of the conversation. Like how did it affect the community? How did the communication affect the community? In the end, it was positive, right? Whether or not the outside media had something to say that was negative, the community itself came together, did the work, proved that everything was good, and then there was a literal stampede to where we're going for tomorrow, right? To where
yeah, but I don't see that as a catastrophe, Lloyd. Like, that's just a predicament of the circumstance. People are going to see what they see, but this team is building regardless of what the world sees or says. We're going to bring users. It doesn't matter. The catastrophes, I think, in communication, honestly, are inter-team communications. Because if we don't bridge everybody's perspective and desires interpersonally within the team, that's where it all falls apart.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I see it, at least. I mean, I understand the broader spectrum, but like understanding if one team member who is very fucking good at what they do is saying, hey guys, we need to look at this, and if it's not being looked at, I mean, that can break the entire team. And if that happens, what do we have?
You don't have the team anymore, right? Like when you have team members that are working together in an organization and their communication's not getting through to one another, do you have a team? Hey, Curtis, so we are an open forum, so you feel free to just jump right in and just to take a natural pause and jump in at any point, okay? But you can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, well, there's lots of, conversations. Don't want to interject. So to Kyle's recent comment and point, I posted a question in the chat. Do you feel that Adam and Cool Guy used the appropriate platform to communicate the problem? And do you feel that the audience that had access to that platform that they chose to use was the appropriate audience?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to also answer when you're done.
That's my.
All of those communications did take people. So the first thing people see is what's on Twitter, and they say, why didn't you communicate this in the back channels? And the answer is they already did.
They did.
They've been doing it for weeks. Every single time I've seen a crisis communication occur on Twitter related to stake pool operations, for example, and it could be anything, it's already been communicated ad nauseum in back channels, and it percolated out into public because it didn't get resolved in the back channels. One of the key things that they flagged is they said, hey CEO, what you just said doesn't match what your DevOps team just said in Discord. That was one of the first things that was said. Hey, you're doing this, you're saying this, but that's not what your team said in Discord. Mm-hmm. So usually by the time it goes out in public, it's been discussed ad nauseum in the back channels. And the first thing I always see people do, I've seen this for years. This isn't just Cardano, this is everything. And they say, well, why don't you discuss that in appropriate channels? And the answer is, well, we are. And this blockchain is an open public system, and it should be discussed openly and publicly.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And, it's funny because even the one that we talked about earlier, that sort of crisis communication where it was forced on us, same thing. We discussed it ad nauseum. That 3-line tweet that we had to send on that customer was like agonized over, and we still got it wrong. For
a month.
For a month. It was like, a month.
How do we actually do this? How do we solve it? Well, we can't really solve it. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, how do we communicate it? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of work, and we agonized over it. Like, we tried hard. We tried our best. And it came out as good as we could get. And then we got burned a little. But in 2020 hindsight, we realized, no, we could have probably done it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I hope that answered your question, Curtis.
Well, I was just going to respond to that, Richard. And I try to think of things, analytically. I don't try to get emotionally involved. But so do you think that the event that actually got the traction that we were looking for was posting it on Twitter and YouTube and getting the public eye involved? Is that what triggered IOHK's involvement?
Yes.
I think so in this case, yes.
Yes, because that's how it goes. Yes. History has proven none otherwise. When the community state makes a statement, IOG listens. It's pretty simplistic. History has shown none other different.
Haven't they already released 135.3 before Adam tweeted about hey, by the way, 135.2 would be catastrophical if deployed on mainnet.
That was my understanding.
That's how the bug was found, was when 135.2 touched mainnet, where fortunately people decided to just put it out there to see what it does, and that's when the bug exposed itself.
Just to clarify, it touched mainnet, meaning it was deployed by.
Yes. The bug was found on mainnet. The bug was found on mainnet. If the hard fork had it reversed, and we had not found it at that point, the mainnet would be crashed. It would be done. That's how important the testing these guys do. It's that empirical. They know what the fuck they're doing. I've sat in a meeting with IOG's expert network engineer and told him things they didn't know about how transactions propagate across the network based on experience versus math. There's a difference.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
on the edge of experience. Everybody else is on the edge of math.
Yeah. We actually had Chatham House Rules meetings with certain people, and we told them about, hey, there's a large transaction bias. The way we construct our transactions, the network is pushing back. So we met with them. What we first did is we were like, well, obviously they might know this, but what we did is we published it on Twitter and said, hey, this is how large transaction bias works. We've tested it. We've observed it. It's real.
Yeah, we wrote 2 Medium articles on it and posted those on Twitter. So it was very extensive stuff.
Yeah,
so,
and IOG was thankful and receptive.
And we tested it, and they were very receptive. Yeah, and they said, hey, can you come meet with us and talk to us more about what you are seeing and how you're seeing it? And it helped them as well. And there was really no crisis communication on that, but you remember earlier in the year, around mid-January, when here was the effect. Do you guys remember around mid-January through February? I remember it well because we were in the trenches. When the Cardano network appeared to slow down, it kind of like got really clunky. You guys remember that?
It was almost 3 days for some transactions to go through.
Yeah, that was part of the reason why. It wasn't Sunday Swap's fault.
No.
It didn't really have anything to do with Sunday Swap.
And the crisis communication in that instance was to the public. We had to write entire articles and spend lots of time public facing. Yes, your transaction's safe. Yes, what you've asked for is on its way. You have to wait for it. Here's what we're doing to get it there. So that was crisis communication. It's just it wasn't individuated. It was just we had to open the broadcast up and just try to tell everyone that we could, hey, here's how you do it. During that time frame, go ahead.
Yeah, and one of the coolest things is, so I made a technical diagram. I made a network diagram that explained it. And I'm like, I really like this diagram because I made it. Now, obviously, it was technically correct, but it wasn't good for the average user. It really sucked because it was too technical. But then we have an artist on the team, and the artist said, hey, I can draw that into a graphic, who happens to also be an engineer. And he drew a cartoon, and everyone understood that instantaneously. In one eyeball, in 2 seconds, they said, oh, I know what that means. And it showed how the network congestion was being caused and how it gets solved. So there was a couple things. Some network parameter tunings solved that. Some modifications to how our system operates also solved that. Yep. But it did clean up the congestion immediately within a few days. We saw it get better. And then as more parameter tunings were made, it got better and better and better. But the good thing is at least we knew what it was, and we communicated what the problem was. And that was important.
And it wasn't...
In crisis communications, the best thing to do is you got to clearly say, this is the issue. You can't be afraid of hurting people's feelings because they're going to see it. They're going to ask anyway. Why tap dance? So what Lloyd and Kyle and I do with our team is we'll get together and say, hey, what's everything that we need to get communicated? What do we got to get out there? And then we make sure we encapsulate that. And then we go through a process of asking ourselves questions. Say, what is the average person going to ask? And then we answer that as well. Lloyd's a very good writer, by the way. Shout out to Lloyd.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, and Tom, I saw you were unmuting yourself a couple times. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm not sure my microphone's working there. Can any of you guys hear me?
I hear you fine. Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, no, I think the moment passed, actually.
Okay. All right.
It's good to know that I can interject if I need to.
Yeah, please do. Yes, so we try to keep this an open, flowing conversation. So yeah, please do just interject if you feel you've got a moment. But I also try to reach around the room.
Okay, sorry. Go. How many opportunities were there before this was discovered, where it was allegedly checked? It had been checked, it had been verified, it was safe, it went out there. What's the number of failures in the system for it to get to this point?
So 135.0 had it, 135.1 had it, 135.2 had it. It got captured in 135.2 after it ended up on mainnet, and by then it was too late for testnet because testnet had been destroyed. But thankfully, mainnet had not, because it didn't get to the same critical mass on mainnet that it had on testnet. So,
Yeah,
So
no,
just
and
so I
we
know-
don't, and we don't know how intense and thorough the IoG testing is, but I do know, based on my observations of what comes out of the product, it's extremely thorough. It's extremely good. It's like insanely high quality testing.
It's solid, but community stake pool operators have saved the chain on at least 3 occasions.
yes.
Period. Give us our fucking room to test. We are valuable.
Right. And that is the hope with this new setup, is that we can keep this alive. And although both the preview and pre-production have to be respun, because when they were spun up, they weren't spun up correctly. So they're already going to have to be
people make
respun again.
mistakes when you do
They
big
do.
things. When you do big things, and you make a mistake, you make big mistakes,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Okay, as long as as long as the rocket doesn't blow up with people on board, you're good.
We're in good
Right.
shape.
And that's what happened here. Is it was caught before the rocket blew up in the air. It was caught
And-
while it was still on the ground.
And it was caught. Hey gang, this is Newman.
Hey, Newman.
Thanks for inviting us all to the combo. And it was caught because of so a communication thing. Like you're saying that it was tried to handle through sort of back channels or typical protocol, and then it was sort of called out on Twitter.
Yes.
And that sounds like to me like journalism. Like, isn't that seem like who could or should do that work before? I mean, is that a main thing, or that's my question.
It's more important than price because
In an ideal world, a journalist would understand what's going on, but they don't. Charles has publicly stated that there's been an organization that should publicly communicate these issues. That organization attempted to publicly communicate issues to IOG without fail. So we opted to build product to patch where we weren't being heard. And so it's a matter of, okay, let's be real about what we need to do to get done. So yeah, I mean, you can patch things off, and there are people within IOG who are literally tasked with managing the community, but their abilities are so far. They push that internally, and the thing is we ran into some, I think, a bureaucratic conflict with game theory, right? Like there's an adherence to the mathematical model when we all clearly know that that's not the case. And so, there's bureaucracy within IOG. Once the change has been reflected, that the change never comes. So as the community, it's like, okay, what do we do?
Right.
We do what we can do, right?
Right. Raise the flag, or do whatever you have to do as a community. This is decentralization working. Like, one company cannot do all of this. It's not possible. So we can't rely on the one company to do all of this. So the relationship between the company, this gets back to communication, the relationship between the company, IOG, and the community, the stake pool operators, the Catalyst, participants, et cetera, whatever part of the community it is, there has to be a solid participatory communication between all those parties, because if it doesn't exist and it breaks down, things will bubble up in public and cause communication catastrophes, which is what we saw.
Well, communication catastrophe is like not that bad compared to what would happen to mainnet if the bug was there, and it would
100% agree.
Yeah, communication catastrophe is like what we're seeing here is just I'm feeling like, hey, I am so glad it happened in the communication space, not in the actual production code.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that would it have happened to, say, Bitcoin?
Remember, that was actual production code.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, that was production code.
135.0 was was told
Yeah,
to be put
but
online.
I'm glad that we are not hard forking with that code into Vassal.
Yes, or it would be
That's
bad.
that's what I'm glad about, and I would say it's not a communication catastrophe. For what it's worth, I think it's a communication success.
Thank you. Yes. Can that improve though? Can this process, can we get this process tighter now to where it doesn't have to bubble up on Twitter? What are the steps as a community that we can take to reach IOG when we need to, and to have IOG reach us when we need them to reach us? Like, where are those steps? How do we improve? How do we work through that communication? How do we take on some of the responsibilities of building this code base and choosing releases? And some of that stuff's happening, right? Like, that's, I know, again, Chatham House rules here. There's some stuff that's been learned over the last couple of weeks, that, there is some real changes coming to release flagging. There's some real changes coming to, to the rules for preview to pre-production to production. So those things are happening, but what do we do to improve them?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to sound like a really simple take, so forgive me in advance. But I think this is evidence of the system working as intended. It being blowing up on Twitter, that should be happening for us. I mean, yeah, okay, we see Charles Hodgkinson, Big G, he's going, oh no, I'm so upset. What? Well, if you look at his Twitter feed, he only engages with things he disagrees with. That's the only thing he tweets out about anyway, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And guys, think about this. Try not to let it get wrapped entirely around Charles, because these communications are important. He may, there might be a different CEO, whatever the case may be. But what's interesting is the Rust Jormungandr code base is very similar in Cardano. It was built during the ITN, and it's used for, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's used for the voting. So it's like almost like a side chain to where when we vote on that Catalyst app on our phone, that's moved over. So that some company may take that open source code and create a new agent, which would be a good thing. Create a new version of the Cardano node, and you'll have an entirely new organization who are going to need test nets and node operators and node operators on testnet and mainnet, and create a whole nother node implementation, which would be a fantastic thing to happen. It'd be incredible if someone put in a big giant Catalyst proposal to build another node implementation. I would be like, wow, yay.
I'd back that guy.
And if that team of it could be a
Yes.
large corporation. They might come in and say, if we can get $6 million, we can implement the node in Rust. $6 million per round for the next 4 rounds. You never know. It could be big dollars because it is a massive engineering feat, and that could happen. And then you're going to have the same thing occurring. It'll work just like the Haskell implementation works, and you're going to have more organizations and communication be unclear. Like sometimes Ethereum runs into problems where they have a certain node implementation that works effectively, and another one that has there could be some kind of issue. And then they say, hey, this implementation is working fine, but there's a problem over here with this implementation. And you see that in the news on Ethereum. And it's okay to have that. It's better to have the new node implementation and deal with the communication
Complications.
complexity in the burden. Yeah. And that's just another example. So then communications get even more complicated.
Right.
Because not only do you have different versions, are you on one, currently the Haskell version is 134.1, 135.3, and now you're going to have the Rust versions of whatever their versioning system is, and the organizations who are running that.
Sure.
And I would anticipate those Rust nodes would communicate with the Cardano network, with the Haskell nodes. You wouldn't know the difference.
Exactly. You shouldn't know the difference, right? That they actually should be fully interoperable and transparent. Yeah.
So like a layer of redundancy where if this system doesn't work, we can fall back onto the other.
Yeah, or not necessarily redundancy, but market share. Like you might have 60% of the nodes are the Haskell nodes and 40% of the nodes are the Rust nodes. And to the user and to the developer who's dropping products on top of the network, they don't know or care. It's just the nodes do what the nodes are supposed to do, and you'll have Haskell and Rust nodes all just playing together. Like right now on the internet, like I'm on Zoom on a Mac. You might be on Windows or Linux.
Shouldn't
Zoom
matter.
doesn't care.
I mean,
Zoom just zooms, and it doesn't care if you're on a Mac, Windows, or Linux.
Right.
Same thing with Cardano node. You might have Haskell
Zoom is
implementations.
Zoom is like single company and a single product. So like for Zoom, it's still the same code, either on Mac or Linux.
Yeah, that's the product sitting
for
on top of it.
Yeah, for blockchains, I think what matters is actually network protocol, but not the implementation. What I think the North Stars of sorts is like there's multiple implementations of Bitcoin, right? And I believe we should strive for the same in Cardano. So like it shouldn't matter which version of Haskell Cardano node you're running. It should matter what protocol version you're like that node is implementing.
The protocol spec, exactly. That there should be it should be a protocol spec that multiple nodes are implementing. And yes, and that's what Rick's advocating as well. From what he was saying, that's the same thing he's advocating. Is you have a protocol and the nodes are written to the protocol, and it is irrelevant if they're Rust, Golang, Java, whatever they are, and but they interoperate with all the other nodes on an equal footing. And having multiples of those for Cardano will be the next level of truly decentralizing what we are, because then IOG is they already are just one entity, but now they really truly are just one entity. They just happen right now to be the entity that maintains the node code
produces the node.
Right.
Yeah,
so
and
gives them
it's
an
centralization
power. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the exact kind of symptom of this problem, centralization, which still is like we need to be more decentralized in that aspect as well.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. And that's what I'm hoping to get at today is trying to find, additional better ways to communicate the more we decentralize, because clearly, as we're all discovering, it becomes more trouble, not less. The more decentralized we are, the more important communications are, and the harder it is to do it well. So that's
my question is, as we are becoming hopefully more decentralized, transitioning to the open source merit-based organization, as was much communicated by aforementioned Charles. So are we going to have fewer such problems, and would a problem like this that we are discussing today, would it occur on something like Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin immune to such things?
I don't think so.
I think they go through it all the time. They have different people and different organizations who build their products around Bitcoin, and they don't all agree. And maybe I don't understand the question, but
I think that no matter what,
any protocol is going to have that problem.
Yes, exactly. Any protocol that you have that has implementations that are multiple implementations that come together and interoperate, you're going to have friction in communication. It's going to happen. So it's a matter of how do you navigate that? What is and what we're trying to say is, so far what's working for us as we grow into this is being transparent, being willing to hear from the community, realize we're gonna mess up, and then try our best when we do mess up to own it and move forward better the next time when it comes to communication and everything else.
Yeah,
right?
well, Cardano is pretty homogeneous in this regard right now. Like, there's only one Cardano node, and that's why the whole thing kind of blew up, right? So, like, because if everyone runs a Cardano node with exactly the same bug, and it occurs in the mainnet, there we go, we're done. So the root cause of this is centralization, and so basically we just need to decentralize more.
So who's building the node next? That's the real question. Who's
Uh,
going to raise
well,
their hand?
Yeah, I mean, there will be new implementations, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Linux Foundation is involved, because there's a lot between Cardano Foundation and the Linux Foundation. That was kind of cool. It's just speculation on my part, but I could see them getting more heavily involved with Cardano related activities.
There's also Hyperledger Foundation, which Cardano is a part of and has expressed some interest as well. So there's some possibilities there as well. That would be another interesting gigantic animal to put some energy toward a new Cardano node. That would be very again, no inside information there, just speculation of my own, but that's another one that would be great to see.
Yeah. So going back to crisis communications, I looked up a phrase by Warren Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
He said it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it.
There you
If
go.
you think about that, you'll do things differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that's a pretty reasonable statement.
It is. You don't have to rush, right? Like when we've rushed, we've made bigger mistakes than when we've taken a minute and checked in and said, "Hey, is this the right thing to say or not?" You know. And it's caught some doozies.
Yeah, even today.
Yes.
Even today, during our marketing push, we're like, "Oh, nope, that's a mistake. That's not technically correct." Now that wasn't crisis communications. That was just regular communications.
Yeah.
So if you can make mistakes during regular communications, think about it during crisis. I think crisis. It's important to get the word out first. It's important to get the word out fast and accurate. If you don't have all the facts, make sure people know I don't have all the facts, but this is what's going on. This is what we know so far. This is what we have so far. We'll fill in the blanks later when we figure it out.
Exactly. It's transparent to say, I don't have the answers yet. It's transparent. It's okay to say, we're working on it. We are aware of the problem. We don't have any answers yet, but when we do, we're going to give you answers. But I liken that, and actually, this is another thing for me for all kinds of communications. If you make a promise to your reader, your listener, your viewer, whatever they are, if you make a promise, make sure you fulfill the promise. So if in an article I say, I'm going to give you 5 tips to, grill a steak, I better give you 5 tips, and they better all be on grilling a steak. Right? So if you make a promise to your reader, your viewer, your listener, make sure you deliver on it. So if you in crisis communication say, we don't know the answers, but we're going to let you know when we do, then you have to keep communicating, and you have to keep telling them that you've got, we have gathered some information. We expect to be able to give you it by maybe this date, and then if you're going to miss that date, you've got to communicate that. So everything you give information wise, you're then going to have to, it's a promise you've made that you need to fulfill, because that's where your credibility stays high, is when you continue to answer for what you promised.
And speak with absolutes as well. Don't put yourself in a position where you're doing weasel word statements, right? Where you can avoid promising something because on a actually I said 3-4 times. I mean, the first time it ruins your credibility. 3-4 times, and everyone thinks you're a joke.
Exactly. You've lost it completely. So yeah, it's straightforward information, including just I don't know, and then answering your promises.
Even saying I don't know is also an absolute. Here's what we do know, absolute, and here's what we don't know, everything else, also absolute. It's just we don't know, and that is okay, because you're still working through what you're trying to solve. Yeah.
And I'm just parroting here because both, Rick and Lloyd, you guys have voiced this before, but in the traditional industry, you find, silos of people working in specific, areas. And so the message comes from the developers and it starts making its way up to the person who's going to write the article or write this information. And it's making a lot of hops. The more hops you make, the more you're playing the telephone game, your message gets misconstrued. And so I think that is an area that needs to be addressed specifically in Cardano so that the message isn't sent out wrong,
And
Sure.
that's what Kyle was saying early on in the conversation here today, right? He was saying about the fact that this interpersonal communication is so important. Our team we're not small, but we're not huge, but we're very tight knit. Like, we make sure that we have buy-in from each other, that what we're putting out does meet the requirements. Our developers read the Medium articles I write before they go out. But I don't ever publish anything without getting peer review. Ever. Yeah, it slows the process down. I could jam out an article in 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. That 20-minute article could have a technical inaccuracy that could ruin our credibility. I can't do that. Right. So I write it. I get the framework in place. I get I make the promises, make sure I delivered them. And then I'm like, okay, peer review guys, I need you guys to tell me what I did wrong. And it happens. It happens all the time. We're constantly rewriting bits and pieces of the articles. Oh, well, this isn't quite what we need. It's got to be this other thing. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
that's a perfect example. There's a lot that can be learned from this. And this is important. So Lloyd will write an article based on what our engineers have been posting. Lloyd is also engineering related. And so the article becomes his interpretation of what they were trying to say. And it's usually, I got to be honest with you, it's usually like 99% dead on. And then we find this one word that changes the meaning of the sentence. And what happens is, if you write extensively, some of you have, where if you write an article extensively, you become blind to your own mistakes. You can't see the mistake you made because you've already formulated it. But getting a second set of eyes, we kind of do third, fourth sets of eyes when we peer review those articles. And there's fine tuning. Now, usually the articles are not in crisis mode, but once they do go out, there's almost no changes. The fortunate side on Medium, if we do catch a change, we go back and modify it and go, okay, let's fix that little bit. But the best part, I think, of that peer reviewing the articles that are being communicated to the public is, by the time we're done, we all understand it. Like, that process gets us on the same page and saying, this is what we are communicating to the public, and at least four or five of us have read it, and we're now on the same page.
Right.
And
we've actually called it, we call it our single point of truth.
Yeah,
we
call it our single point of truth is the Medium article. It doesn't matter if Bob or Alice posts random shit on Twitter from their personal account. That doesn't matter. Then you just tell Bob or Alice, hey, you got that one wrong, bro. Right? But we do point to the Medium article as a single source of truth, and we do refer that by basically SOP is, if anyone on the team is trying to answer a question, we have a Medium article on it, please look at the Medium article as a single source of truth. And I like how you put that, Lloyd, because that keeps us on the same page as well.
Yeah, it's our way currently that we've worked out that allows our communications to be consistent, right? We share what we know and what we've managed to put together. It's as good as it gets for now for our team.
Yeah, and you'd think we'd resolve that on the back channels. For example, things we resolved on the back channels in the last couple of days. I got into a debate with Adam Dean about signing with a ledger, and I did not know you could not sign data. I'm like, why do I go on these websites? I want the connect wallet button, just go full degen mode, and I can't. And I'm like, why can't we do that? And Adam Dean's like, you can't sign data. Now, to him, it's simple. To me, that's not so simple. I'm like, I want my NFT, bro.
You had to, and you proved it to yourself too. I saw you went through the process.
And you saw me, and when Adam told me this is the way it works, Rick, and he shoved it down my throat, I'm like, oh yeah? Oh, I'm gonna force my ledger to make it work. And guess what? It didn't work. So I just posted it to Adam and said, yep, you're right, it didn't work. I just had to see for myself, because why doesn't it work? And the cool thing is, now me and Kyle both learned, oh, that's the error message you get. What that means is you can't sign data with a ledger, right? And I was like, wow, I learned something new. And then also the flip side happened. So we got into a debate about the VRF checks, two checks or one check. So currently, the current node is doing 2 checks today, and tomorrow when it transitions, it'll just be doing the 1 check, the 1 VRF check, right? And I thought that was kind of cool because we were trying to ultra clarify what is the impact on Vassal on how we do operations and what we're going to do tomorrow. We might have to be doing crisis communications tomorrow. Tomorrow
right.
we're going to slam the network with a massive amount of data, and we're going to find out what it can do, right? Right out of the womb, as soon as Vassal goes live on mainnet. Like,
well, we're giving it 15 minutes.
No, we went with Andrew. Convinced me to go full degen mode and just let it roll. Right, Lathy? That was the final decision. We're going full degen, and as the epic rolls over and the nodes make the transition to Vassal, they're going to be able to slam DripDropz full power and just go. It's going to be epic, and it's going to work. I got high confidence. I got very high confidence that we're going to try to push the chain load to absolute max capacity. I don't think we can. We need to break the previous record of 5.5 transactions per second.
We shall see.
We're going to find out. We're going to find out if our crisis communications are effective.
Well, let's hope not. No, let's hope we don't have to do. Let's hope we don't have to find out if our crisis communications are effective, because everything works really smoothly tomorrow. So that's
I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be fine.
Hope is not a plan, but we're still going to hope for the best on that one. So, and on that,
tested.
On that note, guys, I wanted to bring up that our topic for next week, we're going to go a little further, a little different from communications, but we kind of follow along the line. Next week, we're going to talk about brand building. So what is your blockchain brand? You're going to join us as we talk about the importance of building a brand, even if you're a startup. And all are welcome, as always, to our open conversations. So thank you all for attending this week. Thanks for all the feedback, all the great information.
Hey, real quick, are we going to bring Doug into that?
We are. Yes, Doug's already agreed to come next week, and we're going to talk about building brands. Yeah.
Guys, definitely come. We're bringing a brand engineer into this, and it'll be a really good discussion. Super awesome fucking expertise.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun.
I've already learned quite a few things from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Doug has helped the little inside baseball here. Doug has helped the DripDropz team with its own brand and its own brand voice. He's helping us further develop our brand, but he's agreed to come in and have just a good open, just like we do every week, a good open conversation. So where if you have questions about brand building or about your own brand and what you think might work or not work, Doug will be here to help us have that conversation and share a lot of his insights. He's worked at some pretty major media companies in the past, but I'll let him tell you all that next week. So we look forward to seeing you guys then. Again, thank you all for your participation this week. Thanks for all the great feedback, all the great information you shared, and all your insights. We always appreciate it, and we will see you all next week.